Hey there, how's it going? Thanks for joining me today. Whether you're relaxing at home, on your commute, or winding down for the evening, I'm really glad you're here. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning, but instead of sunrise painting your room with golden light, you watch the sun sink backwards into the western sky. Your coffee cup sits on the table, steam spiraling downward as the liquid cools from hot to cold to ice. You reach for it, and the coffee unstirs itself, cream pulling away in perfect spirals, separating back into the pitcher that somehow appears in your other hand. Before we continue this journey, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extraordinary for you. This isn't some fever dream or science fiction fantasy. This is backwards time, and it's one of the most mind-bending concepts that scientists have been wrestling with for over a century. The crazy part? The more we understand about the universe, the more we realize that time flowing backwards isn't just possible. It's happening all around us. Right now, in ways that would blow your mind. 4 billion years ago, when our solar system was nothing but cosmic dust swirling in the darkness, something extraordinary happened. Stars ignited across the cosmos like 1 billion birthday candles being lit at once. And in that moment, they set time's arrow on its relentless forward march. Every second since then, every heartbeat, every breath you've taken, every word I'm speaking right now, it's all been riding this invisible current we call time, flowing from past to future like a river that never stops. But here's what's going to keep you up at night thinking, what if that arrow suddenly reversed? What if the universe decided to play its grand movie backwards? Think about that for a second. Really picture it. You'd wake up at sunset instead of sunrise. Every day, you'd grow younger instead of older. Your morning shower would end with you stepping out dirty and climbing in clean. You'd walk backwards to work, sit at your desk, and untype emails that somehow already existed, watching words disappear letter by letter until your screen went blank. The wildest part. This concept has been haunting humanity for thousands of years. Ancient Hindu texts describe time as a great wheel, not a straight line, but a circle that could spin in either direction. They called it the Kala Chakra, the wheel of time, and they believed it could reverse just as easily as it moved forward. The ancient Greeks had their own word for it, palindromos chronos, time that reads the same forwards and backwards, like the word race car or madam. Greek philosophers would sit under olive trees, debating whether time was an illusion, whether past and future existed simultaneously, whether the entire universe might be stuck in an eternal loop, playing the same cosmic movie over and over. Now, you might be thinking, come on, this is just ancient philosophy. Surely modern science has figured out that time only goes one way, right? Wrong, dead wrong. Here's the thing that's going to absolutely blow your mind. Today, right now, in laboratories from MIT to CERN, scientists are achieving tiny time reversals. We're talking nanoseconds, billionths of a second, but they're actually making time go backwards. They're taking particles and making them evolve in reverse, watching quantum events unfold backwards like a movie in rewind. And here's the kicker, the fundamental laws of physics. They don't actually care which direction time flows. Let me say that again, because it's so important. The basic equations that govern everything in our universe. Gravity, electromagnetism, the forces that hold atoms together, they work perfectly whether time moves forward or backward. It's like discovering that the rules of the game you've been playing your whole life actually allow you to move in the opposite direction, but nobody ever told you. Einstein's equations of relativity, they're completely time-symmetric. Newton's laws of motion work just fine in reverse. Even the quantum mechanics that governs the bizarre world of subatomic particles, it's all perfectly happy, running backwards through time. So if the laws of physics allow time to flow backwards, why doesn't it? Why have you never seen a broken coffee mug spontaneously reassemble itself? Why don't scrambled eggs ever unscramble? Why doesn't smoke flow back into chimneys and compress itself back into logs? This question has tormented some of the greatest minds in history. And the answer, when we finally figured it out, revealed something so profound about the nature of reality that it changed everything we thought we knew about time, existence, and our place in the universe. The journey into backwards time begins with a simple question that sounds almost childish. Why does time move forward at all? But don't let the simplicity fool you. This question has driven brilliant scientists to madness, sparked revolutionary discoveries, and ultimately led us to understand that the forward flow of time, this thing we take for granted every single moment of our lives, is actually one of the most mysterious and remarkable features of reality. Picture yourself standing at the edge of this mystery. You're about to dive into a world where stars could inhale their own light, where black holes become cosmic fountains, where the Big Bang transforms into the Big Crunch, and where the very concept of cause and effect gets turned completely upside down. You're about to discover that time isn't the steady, reliable friend you thought it was. Time is wild, strange, and far more flexible than you ever imagined. And understanding what happens when it flows backwards will change the way you see everything, from your morning coffee to the birth and death of the universe itself. The ancient Hindu sages were right about one thing: time is a wheel. But they couldn't have imagined just how extraordinary that wheel really is, or how learning to see it spinning in reverse would unlock secrets about reality that most people never even dream exist. Are you ready to step into a world where yesterday becomes tomorrow, where memory becomes prophecy, where the impossible becomes inevitable? Because once we start this journey into backwards time, there's no going back. Or should I say, there's no going forward. The paradox begins now. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at a clock the same way again. You'll understand why every second that ticks by is actually one of the most miraculous things happening in the entire universe. The arrow of time isn't just moving forward, it's carrying all of us along for the most incredible ride imaginable. And to really appreciate that ride, sometimes you have to imagine what it would be like to take it in reverse. So buckle up. We're about to explore the impossible. We're about to discover what happens when tomorrow becomes yesterday, and why that might be the most important story in the universe. The wheel of time is about to start spinning backwards, and you're about to see reality in a way that will change everything you thought you knew about the world around you. Here we go. The year was 1850. And Rudolf Clausius was about to discover something that would haunt scientists for the next century and a half. He was sitting in his study in Berlin, surrounded by pages of equations, trying to understand why steam engines worked the way they did. What he found instead was a disturbing truth about the universe itself. Every equation in physics worked perfectly in reverse. Think about that for a moment. Gravity pulling an apple toward the ground? The math worked just as well if you imagined the apple flying up from the earth to the tree. A ball rolling down a hill? The equations were perfectly happy describing it rolling uphill. Light traveling from the sun to your eyes? Mathematically indistinguishable from light traveling from your eyes to the sun. But here's what drove Clausius to distraction. If physics worked both ways, why didn't the world? Why had he never seen scrambled eggs unscramble themselves? Why didn't broken windows spontaneously reassemble? Why didn't spilled milk ever flow backwards up into the glass? Clausius discovered something he called entropy, basically the universe's tendency toward disorder. And what he found was terrifying in its implications. The universe was like a giant clockwork toy that was slowly winding down. Energy was spreading out, becoming less useful, less organized. Everything was sliding toward chaos, and there was no way to stop it. But the equations didn't care about this direction. They were perfectly symmetric, perfectly reversible. The math was telling him that scrambled eggs should be able to unscramble just as easily as they scrambled. Yet it never happened. Never. This paradox consumed the brilliant Austrian physicist Ludwig Boltzmann for 30 years of his life. Picture this man, one of the greatest minds of the 19th century, wrestling night after night with a question that seemed to tear reality apart at the seams. How could the fundamental laws of nature be reversible when everything we see moves in only one direction? Boltzmann was obsessed. He'd walk the streets of Vienna, muttering about molecules and probability. His colleagues thought he was losing his mind. Students would see him staring at steam rising from his coffee cup, scribbling equations on napkins, trying to understand why that steam never flowed, back down and reassembled into liquid. The breakthrough came when Boltzmann realized it wasn't about impossibility, it was about probability. Here's the key insight that changed everything. A broken glass could theoretically reassemble itself. The pieces could spontaneously jump back together, the cracks could heal, the fragments could organize themselves back into perfect crystalline structure. Physics would allow it. The equations would smile and nod approvingly. But the odds are 1 in 10 to the power of 80. Now let me help you understand how impossibly huge that number is. If you wanted to write it out, you'd need more atoms than exist on planet Earth just for the zeros. It's a number so vast that if you started counting when the universe began 14 billion years ago and counted one number every nanosecond, you wouldn't even be close to reaching it when the last star burns out trillions of years from now. This is why broken glasses don't fix themselves. Not because physics forbids it, but because the universe would rather die of old age than wait for it to happen randomly. But here's where it gets really wild. Boltzmann's insight revealed something extraordinary about what backwards time would actually look like on a cosmic scale. If you could somehow reverse the flow of time for the entire universe, everything would have to run in perfect reverse. Picture this. Stars would inhale their own light. Instead of blazing furnaces converting matter into energy and radiating it across space, they'd become cosmic vacuum cleaners, sucking radiation back in from the void and somehow reassembling it into hydrogen and helium. The light from distant galaxies wouldn't be traveling toward us. It would be flowing away from us, back to its source, black holes. Those monsters that devour everything that gets too close would transform into what physicists playfully call white fountains. Instead of crushing matter into infinitely dense points, they'd be spewing out perfectly organized streams of particles. Matter would flow out of them in reverse, expanding and cooling, spreading across space in the exact opposite pattern of how it fell in. The Big Bang itself would become the Big Crunch. Instead of the universe expanding from a single point 14 billion years ago, everything would be contracting back toward that point. Galaxies would be rushing toward each other instead of flying apart. The cosmic microwave background radiation, that faint afterglow of creation that we can still detect today, would be converging back toward the beginning instead of spreading outward. But here's the most mind-bending part. In this backwards universe, the second law of thermodynamics would still hold true. Entropy would still increase, but increase backwards through time. The universe would be getting more organized as it moved toward its beginning, not less. Think about what this means. Every broken thing would be in the process of fixing itself. Every mixed-up system would be in the process of unmixing. Ashes would be gathering themselves into logs. Smoke would be flowing down chimneys and condensing back into wood. The universe would be a massive cosmic-scale healing process. In 2009, physicist Lorenzo Marconi at the University of Pavia proposed something that sounds like science fiction, but is actually grounded in solid physics. He suggested that backwards time regions might exist in our universe right now, but they'd be forever hidden from us. Here's why. Memory itself requires increasing entropy. To remember something, your brain has to create physical traces, neural pathways, chemical changes, electrical patterns. All of these require energy to flow from organized states to less organized states. In a backwards time region, entropy would be decreasing, which means memory formation would be impossible. So even if there are parts of the universe where time flows backwards, we could never perceive them. We could never remember encountering them. They'd be like cosmic blind spots, not because they're physically invisible, but because the very act of observing then would require forward-flowing time. Imagine walking through your house and discovering a room where everything was running in reverse, water flowing upward from faucets, broken items spontaneously repairing themselves, food uncooking itself back into raw ingredients. But the moment you stepped out of that room, you'd forget it existed. Your memory of it would unform itself, leaving no trace that you'd ever been there. This isn't just theoretical speculation anymore. In 2015, researchers at Washington University actually reversed time for quantum particles, making them evolve backwards for a few nanoseconds. They took quantum systems and literally made them undo their own evolution. Like watching a movie in rewind, but with actual physical processes. The technique involves something called quantum state tomography, essentially taking a detailed snapshot of every aspect of a quantum system, then using precise electromagnetic pulses to make the system retrace its steps. For a few billionths of a second, these particles experienced backwards time. But here's what's truly extraordinary. During those nanoseconds of reversal, the particles weren't just randomly undoing their changes. They were following the exact mathematical path backwards that they had followed forwards. It was like watching a dancer perform a complex routine in reverse, hitting every step with perfect precision. This proves that Boltzmann was right. The universe really doesn't have a preferred direction at the fundamental level. Forward and backward are equally valid from the perspective of basic physics. Time's arrow isn't carved into the foundations of reality. It emerges from probability, from the sheer statistical impossibility of large-scale organizations spontaneously appearing. But this revelation opens up an even more staggering possibility. If time reversal is possible for small quantum systems, and if the laws of physics are truly time-symmetric, then theoretically, the entire universe could reverse direction. Not gradually, but instantaneously. One moment time flows forward, the next moment it flows backward, and everything that ever happened begins to unhappen. The scrambled eggs would unscramble. The broken glasses would heal. Your morning coffee would unstir itself. And you, along with everyone and everything else, would begin the long journey backward through existence, undoing every moment you'd ever lived, until you finally disappeared into the void from which you came. Of course, the probability of this happening is so infinitesimally small that it makes our broken glass example look likely by comparison. But the fact that it's possible at all reveals something profound about the nature of time itself. We live in a universe that could run either direction, but chooses to run forward. And that choice, if we can even call it a choice, is what makes existence possible. Without time's forward arrow, there would be no growth, no change, no life, no consciousness, no stories to tell. The universe in rewind would be a place of perfect organization and absolute meaninglessness. Everything would be undoing itself, unlearning itself, unliving itself. It would be a cosmos of perpetual goodbye, where every moment led not to new possibilities, but to the systematic erasure of everything that had ever been. Boltzmann spent 3 decades wrestling with these implications. The weight of understanding that our forward-flowing time might be nothing more than a cosmic accident, a statistical fluke in an otherwise time-symmetric universe, ultimately broke his spirit. In 1906, at the age of 62, he took his own life, unable to bear the burden of seeing reality so clearly, but his tragedy gave us one of the most profound insights in all of science. We don't live in a universe that must move forward through time. We live in a universe that chooses to move forward through time. And that choice, however it's made, is what gives meaning to every second of our existence. The cosmos could be running backwards right now, and we'd never know it. But it isn't. It's flowing forward, carrying us all toward an uncertain but open future. And understanding why that's so remarkable requires us to dive even deeper into the strange world of backwards time. Because when we imagine life itself running in reverse, we discover truths about existence that most people never even dream of contemplating. Imagine walking through a graveyard at sunset, watching in horror as tiny hands push up through the soil. Not the hands of zombies rising from their graves, but the hands of babies, emerging from the earth as fully formed corpses, then somehow becoming more alive as they grow smaller and younger, until they eventually disappear entirely back into their mother's wombs. This is what birth would look like in backwards time. And it's just the beginning of how grotesque and fascinating life would become if we could somehow reverse the biological arrow of time. In this backwards reality, your entire life cycle would unfold like a horror movie played in rewind. You'd start as a corpse in a coffin, gradually becoming more animated until you climbed out of your grave. Then you'd spend decades growing younger, stronger, more energetic, until you reached the peak of youth. But it wouldn't stop there. You'd continue shrinking, becoming a teenager, then a child, then a toddler, until finally you crawled backwards into a hospital and somehow disappeared into your mother's body. Death wouldn't be an ending. It would be a beginning. Funeral homes would become places of resurrection. Grieving families would gather to watch their loved ones return to life, becoming progressively healthier and more vibrant, until they were eventually young enough to need caretakers again. But here's where it gets really disturbing. Eating. In backwards time, you wouldn't consume food, you'd produce it. Meals would begin with you sitting at an empty plate, concentrating intensely, until suddenly you'd vomit a fully formed dinner onto the dishware. Chewed food would somehow reassemble itself in your mouth into recognizable shapes. A hamburger would reconstruct itself from the chaos of digestion. Meat, lettuce, tomato, bun, all somehow organizing themselves from the molecular soup in your stomach. Your body would be a reverse entropy machine, taking the random thermal energy and chemical chaos inside you and organizing it into complex, structured food. Restaurants would be places where people came to regurgitate meals onto plates, which would then be served to other customers who would somehow absorb them back through their digestive systems. Think about that process for a moment. Your stomach would need to take simple molecules, proteins broken down into amino acids, carbohydrates reduced to simple sugars, fats dissolved into fatty acids, and somehow reassemble them into a perfectly structured cheeseburger. Not just any cheeseburger, but the exact cheeseburger that you had eaten hours earlier, complete with the specific arrangement of condiments and the precise way you had bitten into it. Cooking would become an act of destruction rather than creation. Instead of combining ingredients to make something delicious, you'd take a finished meal and somehow separate it back into its component parts. The sizzling pan wouldn't be cooking an egg, it would be uncooking one, watching as the white and yolk separated and somehow flowed back into the shell, which would then reassemble itself around them. Farmers wouldn't grow crops, they'd shrink them. Instead of planting seeds and watching them develop into mature plants, they'd take fully grown vegetables and somehow compress them back into tiny seeds, which would then burrow themselves into the soil and disappear. But the psychological implications are even more disturbing than the physical ones. Conversations in backwards time would begin with emotional farewells and end with awkward introductions. Imagine meeting someone for the first time by saying goodbye to them, knowing everything about their life, then gradually forgetting them until you finally exchange names and walk away as strangers. "I'm really going to miss you," you'd say to someone you'd never met. "Thanks for all the memories," they'd reply, even though you hadn't created any yet. Then you'd spend the next few hours gradually learning less about each other, until finally one of you would say, "Nice to meet you, and walk away, never to see each other again. Relationships would unfold backwards through time. Marriages would begin with bitter divorces, couples gradually learning to tolerate each other, then like each other, then love each other, until finally they'd meet for the first time and walk away as strangers. The honeymoon would come at the very end of the relationship, just before the couple forgot they'd ever met. Love letters would start with heartbreak and end with hope. "I never want to see you again" would be the first line, and "I think I might be falling for you" would be the last. just before the letter writer forgot that the recipient existed. Your daily routine would be absolutely backwards. You'd start each day exhausted and end it energized. Instead of waking up refreshed and gradually getting tired, you'd begin in a state of complete fatigue and somehow become more alert and energetic as the day progressed. By bedtime, you'd be wide awake and ready for action. But that's when you'd lie down and unconsciously transfer your energy into 8 hours of sleep. Reading would be a process of gradual forgetting. You'd start at the last page of a book, knowing exactly how everything turned out, then work your way backwards through the story, gradually losing understanding of the plot until you reached the first page and discovered the title for the first time. Every book would be a mystery in reverse. Instead of building suspense toward an unknown conclusion, you'd start with complete knowledge and end in total ignorance. Movies would be even stranger. You'd walk into a theater knowing exactly how the film ended, then spend 2 hours watching the story unfold backwards until you finally discovered what it was about. Love stories would begin with couples parting forever and end with their first glance across a crowded room. Action movies would start with the hero victorious and end with them living peacefully before the adventure began. In 2008, Swedish filmmaker Thomas Alfredson created a short experimental film showing ordinary daily life played in reverse. Audiences found it so psychologically disturbing that most couldn't finish watching. Something about seeing people walk backwards, unhang laundry, and uneat meals created a profound sense of unease that went beyond mere novelty. Viewers reported feeling anxious, depressed, and disoriented after just a few minutes. The backwards motion seemed to tap into something deep in human psychology, our fundamental dependence on forward progress, on cause followed by effect, on beginnings that lead to endings rather than endings that lead to beginnings. But here's what's truly fascinating, that psychological discomfort reveals something profound about how our minds work. We don't just live in forward time, we're psychologically constructed by it. Our entire sense of self, our understanding of growth and meaning and purpose, depends completely on time's forward flow. In backwards time, learning would become forgetting. Instead of accumulating knowledge and skills throughout your life, you'd gradually lose them. You'd start as a wise elder, full of experience and understanding, then slowly become more ignorant and naive until you ended as a baby who knew nothing at all. Schools would be places where children came to have knowledge extracted from them. Instead of teachers imparting information to students, they'd somehow remove understanding from young minds, making them progressively less educated until they finally left school knowing nothing. Graduation wouldn't be an achievement, it would be a tragedy. Instead of celebrating the acquisition of knowledge, families would gather to mourn the beginning of their child's long journey toward ignorance. The concept of progress would be meaningless. Civilization wouldn't advance, it would retreat. Instead of building better technologies and solving more complex problems, humanity would gradually lose its innovations, forgetting how to make computers, then cars, then simple tools, until we eventually lived as primitives who didn't even know how to make fire. Art and creativity would work in reverse too. Instead of artists creating something from nothing, they'd start with masterpieces and gradually destroy them, simplifying them into rough sketches, then blank canvases, then somehow making the paint disappear entirely. Musicians would begin concerts with complex symphonies and end with silence. Writers would start with finished novels and gradually delete words until only blank pages remained. Yet for all its horror, life in reverse would have one strange advantage. You'd never have to worry about the future because you'd already lived it. Anxiety about what might happen would be replaced by certain knowledge of what had happened. There would be no unemployment because you'd know exactly when your career would end and begin. No medical mysteries because you'd remember being healthy. No wondering whether someone loved you because you'd already experienced the entire relationship from breakup to first meeting. But this knowledge would come at a terrible price. Without uncertainty, there could be no hope. Without the possibility of change, there could be no growth. Without the ability to create new experiences, there could be no meaning. The backwards life would be an existence of perfect knowledge and absolute futility. You'd know everything that was going to happen to you, but you'd be powerless to change any of it. Every moment would be predetermined, every choice already made, every possibility already exhausted. In the end, life in reverse motion reveals something crucial about why forward time is so precious. It's not just that we've adapted to live in forward time. It's that forward time is what makes life worth living. The uncertainty, the growth, the possibility of creating something new, the hope that tomorrow might be better than today. All of these depend on time's forward arrow. Without it, existence becomes a cosmic joke. A movie played backwards where everyone knows the ending, but has forgotten why they ever cared about the story in the first place. But to truly understand why this matters, we need to dive even deeper into the backwards world, into the realm where memory becomes prophecy, and where the very foundations of human consciousness get turned completely upside down. Right now, as you're listening to these words, your brain is processing about 40 bits of information per second. That doesn't sound like much. A typical text message contains more data than that. But those 40 bits are enough to capture every conscious thought, every sensation, every memory that makes you who you are. Your brain takes this constant stream of new experiences and encodes them as electrochemical patterns, neural pathways that fire in specific sequences, creating the physical basis of what we call memories. Every moment you've ever lived is stored somewhere in the 3 pounds of tissue inside your skull. A vast library of experiences that stretches back to your earliest childhood. But in backwards time, this entire system would flip upside down. You wouldn't remember the past, you'd remember the future. Think about what this really means. Instead of uncertain anticipation about what might happen tomorrow, you'd have crystal clear recollection of what will happen. You'd wake up each morning with perfect knowledge of every conversation you'd have, every person you'd meet, every decision you'd make. The future would feel as real and detailed as your memories of yesterday. But here's the truly mind-bending part. As you moved backwards through time, the past would become increasingly uncertain. Events that had already happened would feel like vague possibilities. The further back you went, the fuzzier your understanding of what had actually occurred would become. Neuroscientist David Eagleman discovered something remarkable in his 2011 experiments at Stanford. He found that our perception of time depends entirely on how our brains encode new experiences. When we encounter something familiar, time seems to move quickly because our brains don't need to work hard to process it. But when something unexpected happens, our brains go into overdrive, creating more detailed memories, which makes time feel like it's slowing down. In backwards time, this process would completely reverse. Instead of building new memories as time progressed, you'd be losing them. Every moment would feel like the most intense déjà vu imaginable because you'd already lived it. You'd know exactly what was about to happen because you'd already experienced it moving forward. Through time, imagine trying to have a conversation when you already knew every word the other person was going to say. You'd remember them saying it before, even though from their perspective they hadn't said it yet. You'd find yourself finishing their sentences not because you were being rude, but because you literally remembered them speaking those exact words. I was thinking about going to the store to buy some milk, you'd interrupt. You were thinking about buying milk, and you're going to change your mind halfway there and get orange juice instead. And when you get home, you're going to realize you forgot to buy bread, which is what you actually needed. The other person would stare at you in amazement, but to you, it would just be memory. You'd already lived through this exact conversation before, when time was moving forward. Now you were experiencing it again, in reverse. But here's where it gets really disturbing. Free will would become meaningless. How can you make a choice when you already remember making it? How can you decide what to do when you have perfect recollection of what you will do? Every decision would feel predetermined because, from your backwards perspective, it would be. You'd remember choosing chocolate ice cream over vanilla, remember regretting it, remember the brain freeze you'd get from eating it too quickly. The choice would already be made, stored in your memory of the future, leaving you feeling like a passenger in your own life. Depression might completely disappear in backwards time, but so would hope. Think about why we get depressed. It's usually because we're worried about the future or regretful about the past. But in backwards time, you'd know exactly how everything turns out. There would be no point worrying about whether you'd get that job, because you'd remember either getting it or not getting it. There'd be no point feeling sad about a relationship ending, because you'd remember exactly how it ended and why. But hope would vanish too. Hope depends on uncertainty, on the possibility that things might get better. When you know exactly what's going to happen, there's nothing left to hope for. You'd be living in a world of perfect information and emotional flatness. Ambition would be impossible. Why work toward a goal when you already remember whether you achieved it or not? Why try to improve yourself when you know exactly who you're going to become? The entire concept of striving for something better would be meaningless, because better and worse would already be determined by your memories of the future. Language itself would transform in fundamental ways. Instead of saying, "I will go to the store," you'd say, "I came from the store." Instead of, "I hope things work out," you'd say, "I remember how things worked out." The future tense would disappear entirely, replaced by various forms of past tense that described events that hadn't happened yet from everyone else's perspective. Poetry would start with meaning and end in mystery. Instead of building toward a revelation or emotional climax, poems would begin with their deepest insights and gradually become more simple and confused until they ended in wordless silence. The most profound line would be the first one, and readers would experience a gradual loss of understanding as they continued. Stories would be impossible to tell in the traditional sense. How do you create suspense when your audience remembers the ending? How do you build toward a climax when everyone already knows how it resolves? Narratives would have to work entirely differently, focusing on the gradual forgetting of resolution rather than the building toward it. But here's something even stranger. Your sense of personal identity would be completely different. Right now, you are who you are largely because of your accumulated experiences. You remember learning to ride a bike, your first day of school, the taste of your grandmother's cooking, the books that changed your mind, the people who broke your heart. These memories form the foundation of your personality. In backwards time, you'd start with a complete sense of who you are, but it would gradually fade. Instead of building character through experience, you'd lose character through reverse experience. You'd begin as a fully formed adult with a complete personality, then slowly become less defined, less certain of who you are, until you finally ended as a baby with no sense of self at all. The psychological implications are staggering. Mental illness would work in reverse too. Instead of trauma causing long-term psychological damage, traumatic events would somehow heal existing psychological wounds. People with depression would gradually become happier as they approached the traumatic events that, in forward time, had caused their sadness. Therapy would be the process of gradually forgetting solutions to your problems. Instead of working through issues and finding ways to cope, you'd start with perfect mental health and slowly develop psychological problems as you moved backward through the experiences that had originally helped you heal. Learning would become forgetting, but forgetting would become learning. Every skill you possessed would gradually fade away, but as it did, you'd somehow become more aware of what it felt like to not have that skill. You'd remember the process of not knowing how to read, not knowing how to walk, not knowing how to speak. Education would be the systematic removal of knowledge. Universities would be places where students came to have information extracted from their minds. Professors would lecture to increasingly ignorant audiences. somehow drawing facts and concepts out of students' heads until they left knowing less than when they arrived. But perhaps the most profound change would be in how we understood causation itself. Right now, we live in a world where causes precede effects. You flip a switch, then the light comes on. You drop a glass, then it breaks. You plant a seed, then it grows into a tree. In backwards time, effects would precede causes. You'd see the light turn on, then remember flipping the switch. You'd see the glass reassemble itself, then remember dropping it. You'd see the tree shrink back into a seed, then remember planting it. This wouldn't just be a matter of time running in reverse. It would fundamentally change how your mind understood the relationship between actions and consequences. The very concept of because would have to be redefined. Instead of the glass broke because I dropped it, you'd think I dropped the glass because it broke. Memory in backwards time wouldn't be about the past. It would be about the future. But it wouldn't feel like prediction or anticipation. It would feel exactly like memory does now, with the same sense of certainty, the same emotional weight, the same vivid detail. You'd remember your future death as clearly as you now remember your childhood birthday parties. This raises a terrifying question. If you remember dying, would you be afraid of it? Or would death feel like something you'd already experienced and survived? Would the knowledge of your own ending bring peace or horror? The answer might depend on something even more fundamental, whether consciousness could exist at all in backwards time. Because consciousness, as we understand it, might require the forward flow of time to function. Without the ability to form new memories, to grow and change and become something new, would there be anything we could recognize as a thinking, feeling self? Or would backwards consciousness be something entirely alien, a form of awareness so different from our own that we can barely imagine what it would be like to experience it? To understand the full implications of backwards time, we need to dive into the science itself, into the equations and experiments that prove time reversal isn't just possible, but happening all around us right now, in ways that most people never even realize. In 1949, Richard Feynman was doodling in a notebook at Cornell University when he wrote down something that would revolutionize our understanding of time itself. It looked like nonsense at first, just a simple equation with a minus sign in front of the time variable. But what Feynman had discovered was that antimatter might simply be matter moving backwards through time. Think about that for a moment. Every time scientists create antimatter in particle accelerators around the world, they might actually be creating matter that's traveling in the opposite direction through time. An anti-electron, what we call a positron, could literally be an electron that's moving backward through the flow of time itself. Feynman's insight wasn't just clever mathematical wordplay. His equations showed that an electron moving forward in time is mathematically identical to a positron moving backward in time. You couldn't tell the difference by looking at the math. The two situations were perfectly equivalent, like two different ways of describing the same fundamental reality. But here's where it gets really wild. If Feynman was right, then every piece of antimatter in the universe is actually a message from the future. When a positron appears in our particle detectors, it might be an electron that's going to exist tomorrow, traveling backwards through time to reach us today. This wasn't just theoretical speculation. In 2010, scientists at CERN, the massive particle physics laboratory buried beneath the border between France and Switzerland, confirmed something extraordinary. They created antihydrogen atoms and measured their properties with incredible precision. What they found was that antimatter follows exactly the same laws as regular matter, just with everything reversed. An antihydrogen atom behaves exactly like a hydrogen atom would if you could somehow make time run backwards for it. The antiproton nucleus and the positron electron orbit each other in precisely the same way that normal matter would. But with all the charges flipped and all the time evolution reversed. But the real breakthrough came in 2015, when researchers at Washington University achieved something that sounds impossible. They actually reversed time for quantum particles. Not in some theoretical sense, not in some mathematical abstraction, but literally. They made quantum particles evolve backwards through time for a few nanoseconds. The technique they used is almost magical in its elegance. They started with a quantum system in a known state, then let it evolve naturally for a short time, becoming more complex and random as quantum uncertainty took hold. Then, using precise electromagnetic pulses, they essentially played the quantum evolution backwards, making the particles retrace their steps exactly until they returned to their original state. For a few billionths of a second, these particles experienced backwards time, and during those nanoseconds, they weren't just randomly undoing their changes, they were following the exact mathematical path backwards that they had followed forwards. Like dancers performing a complex routine in perfect reverse, IBM pushed this even further in 2019. They used their quantum computer to reverse time, not just for individual particles, but for entire quantum systems. They created quantum states, let them evolve into chaos, then literally rewound them back to their starting point. They effectively unscrambled quantum information, proving that information itself could flow backwards through time under the right conditions. But here's what makes all of this possible: something called the CPT theorem. It stands for charge, parity, and time, and it's one of the most fundamental principles in physics. The theorem states that if you reverse all three of these properties simultaneously, flip all the charges, mirror all the spatial orientations, and reverse the flow of time, then physics can't tell the difference. In other words, a universe running backwards through time, with all matter replaced by antimatter and all spatial relationships mirrored, would be completely indistinguishable from our forward-moving universe. The laws of physics would work exactly the same way. There would be no experiment you could perform to tell which direction time was really flowing. This is why every fundamental equation in physics is time reversible. Einstein's theory of relativity works perfectly in reverse. Quantum mechanics, completely symmetric under time reversal. Even the equations that govern the strong and weak nuclear forces, they're all happy to run backwards through time. The only thing that breaks this symmetry is scale. When you have just a few particles, time reversal is not only possible, but routine. Quantum systems reverse their evolution all the time at the microscopic level. But when you have large numbers of particles, say the 10 to the power of 23 atoms in a single gram of matter, the probability of them all reversing simultaneously becomes so small that it's effectively impossible. Here's a way to visualize just how impossible large-scale time reversal really is. Imagine you have a box containing just 10 molecules of gas. The chance of all 10 molecules spontaneously moving to one corner of the box at the same time is about 1 in 1,000. Unlikely, but it could happen if you waited long enough. Now imagine a box containing 100 molecules. The chance of them all gathering in one corner simultaneously drops to about 1 in 10 to the power of 30, a number so small that you'd have to wait longer than the age of the universe for it to happen once. But a real sample of gas contains about 10 to the power of 23 molecules. The chance of them all spontaneously organizing themselves is 1 in 10 to the power of followed by about 23 zeros. That's a number so large that if you wrote it out, the zeros alone would fill more books than have ever been written in human history. This is why broken glasses don't spontaneously reassemble, why smoke doesn't flow back into chimneys, why scrambled eggs never unscramble themselves. It's not that physics forbids these things, it's that the universe would rather end than wait for them to happen by chance. But what if they didn't have to happen by chance? What if there was some way to coordinate the motion of every single particle in a macroscopic object, the way we can coordinate the behavior of particles in a quantum computer? This is where the science gets truly mind-bending. In theory, if you had perfect knowledge of the position and momentum of every single atom in a broken glass, and if you had perfect control over the forces acting on each atom, you could make that glass reassemble itself. You could create a localized region of backwards time. The amount of information and control required would be staggering. You'd need to track and manipulate more data than exists in all the computers on Earth, but the physics would allow it. There's nothing in the fundamental laws of nature that says it can't be done. Some physicists have speculated about Maxwell's demon, a hypothetical entity that could sort molecules by their energy, effectively reversing entropy on a local scale. If such a being existed, it could create pockets of backwards time within our forward-flowing universe. It could unscramble eggs, reassemble broken objects, and even theoretically reverse aging at the cellular level. But even Maxwell's demon couldn't reverse time globally. The energy required to coordinate the behavior of every particle in the universe would itself require more energy than the universe contains. Global time reversal isn't just unlikely. It's physically impossible under the laws of thermodynamics. Yet the fact that local time reversal is theoretically possible opens up extraordinary possibilities. In 2017, researchers at the University of Rochester created materials that seemed to remember their future states. They developed metals that knew they were going to be bent and prepared their molecular structure accordingly, essentially allowing them to anticipate and adapt to changes that hadn't happened yet. The materials work by exploiting quantum correlations that exist across time. Just as quantum particles can be entangled across space, with changes to one particle instantly affecting another regardless of distance, they can also be entangled across time. A particle today can be quantum mechanically connected to the same particle tomorrow. Quantum computers routinely exploit this temporal entanglement to solve problems by exploring all possible futures simultaneously. When Google announced quantum supremacy in 2019, their quantum computer was essentially using backwards time to perform calculations that would take classical computers 10,000 years. The computer would set up a quantum state, let it evolve through all possible computational paths simultaneously, then use quantum interference to amplify the correct answer while cancelling out the wrong ones. It was like running every possible calculation backwards from the solution to find the right starting point. But perhaps the most extraordinary application of time reversal science is in biology. In 2020, biologist Michael Levin at Tufts University made a startling discovery. Cells can be prompted to remember younger states. By manipulating the electrical patterns in living tissue, he could make old cells behave like young cells, effectively reversing biological time at the cellular level. Levin's experiments suggest that aging might not be a one-way process. If we could understand and control the information patterns that determine cellular behavior, we might be able to make biological systems run backwards through their own development. Not quite time travel, but time reversal at the level of living organisms. The implications are staggering. Could we reverse aging? Could we make wounds unheal themselves back to perfect health? Could we take cancer cells and make them forget how to be cancerous, reverting them to their healthy state? These aren't science fiction fantasies anymore. They're active areas of research based on the solid physics of time reversal. The same principles that allow us to reverse quantum states in laboratories might someday allow us to reverse biological states in living beings. But all of this raises a profound question. If time reversal is possible at small scales, and if the laws of physics are fundamentally time-symmetric, then why does the universe as a whole move forward through time? Why does the arrow of time point in one direction for everything we can see? The answer lies not in the laws of physics themselves, but in the initial conditions of the universe. Time's arrow doesn't come from the rules of the game. It comes from how the game started. The Big Bang created a universe in an extremely low entropy state, and ever since then, entropy has been increasing as the universe evolves toward equilibrium. But here's the truly mind-bending possibility. If the universe is infinite, then somewhere out there, purely by chance, there might be regions where entropy happens to decrease instead of increase. regions where time effectively flows backwards, where broken things spontaneously repair themselves, where the dead return to life. These backwards time regions would be rare beyond imagination. They'd be separated by distances so vast that light couldn't travel between them in the entire lifetime of the universe. But they could exist, and if they do, then backwards time isn't just a theoretical curiosity. It's a real feature of the cosmos, happening right now in places so distant that we'll never see them. The universe might be much stranger than we ever imagined. While we experience time flowing forward, carrying us from past to future, there might be other beings in other regions experiencing time flowing backward, carrying them from future to past. And neither of us would ever know the others existed, because the very structure of time keeps us forever separated. But understanding this doesn't just change how we think about time. It changes how we think about technology, consciousness, and the very meaning of existence itself. Right now, as you're listening to this, there's probably a hospital within a few miles of you where someone is getting an MRI scan. They're lying perfectly still inside a massive machine that's using one of the most sophisticated applications of time reversal physics ever created. And neither they nor their doctor has any idea that they're witnessing reverse time in action. Every MRI machine in every hospital around the world uses a technique called spin echo that literally reverses time at the quantum level. Here's how it works. The machine first sends radio waves into your body, causing hydrogen atoms in your tissues to spin in coordinated patterns. Then, as these atoms naturally lose their coordination and start spinning randomly again, the machine sends a second pulse that reverses their quantum evolution, making them retrace their steps exactly. For a brief moment, the hydrogen atoms in your body experience backwards time. They undo their random motion and return to their original coordinated state, like dancers who've scattered across a stage, suddenly moving backward to reform their perfect formation. The machine detects this reverse signal and uses it to create detailed images of your internal organs. Every time someone gets an MRI, billions of atoms in their body briefly travel backwards through time. It's happening in hospitals right now, all around the world, and it's so routine that medical technicians don't even think about the profound physics involved. They're casually manipulating the flow of time itself to peer inside human bodies. But that's just the beginning. In 2017, researchers at the University of Rochester created something that sounds like magic: materials that remember their future. They developed metal alloys that know they're going to be bent, twisted, or heated, and prepare their molecular structure accordingly. The metals work by exploiting quantum correlations that exist across time. Just as we've learned to create quantum entanglement across space, where particles separated by vast distances remain mysteriously connected, these materials create quantum entanglement across time. An atom today becomes quantum mechanically linked to the same atom tomorrow. When you're about to bend one of these materials, the atoms somehow sense the future stress and rearrange themselves to handle it better. It's as if the metal has a crystal ball that shows it exactly what's going to happen, allowing it to prepare for events that haven't occurred yet. Imagine building with materials like this. Bridges that strengthen themselves just before earthquakes hit. Buildings that repair their own stress fractures before they become dangerous. Airplane wings that adjust their structure in response to turbulence that hasn't happened yet. But the most extraordinary application of time reversal technology is in quantum computing. Every quantum computer is essentially a time machine that explores all possible futures simultaneously, then uses the physics of backwards time to amplify the correct answers. Here's how it works. Instead of processing information step by step like a classical computer, a quantum computer sets up a superposition of all possible solutions to a problem. It's like having a computer that exists in millions of parallel universes simultaneously, with each universe exploring a different potential answer. Then comes the magical part. The quantum computer uses interference patterns, the same physics that allows waves to cancel each other out to eliminate all the wrong answers and amplify the right one. It's like running every possible calculation backwards from the solution to find the correct starting point. Google's quantum computer, which achieved quantum supremacy in 2019, used this backwards time calculation method to solve a problem that would take the world's most powerful classical computers 10,000 years. It did it in 200 seconds by essentially exploring all possible futures of the calculation simultaneously. But quantum computers don't just calculate faster, they calculate differently. They're not just processing information more quickly. They're processing information that hasn't been created yet. They're reaching into the future to grab solutions that don't exist in the present, then pulling those solutions back to our time. This isn't science fiction. It's happening right now in laboratories around the world. Scientists are routinely using the physics of backwards time to solve problems by working backward from solutions they haven't found yet. IBM has pushed this even further with their quantum computer that can literally reverse the flow of information through time. In 2019, they demonstrated quantum rewinding, the ability to take scrambled quantum information and unscramble it perfectly, like watching a movie in reverse, but with actual physical processes. They created a quantum state, let it evolve into apparent randomness, then used precise electromagnetic pulses to make it retrace its evolution exactly. For a few nanoseconds, information flowed backwards through time inside their quantum computer, unscrambling itself back to its original organized state. The implications for data storage and processing are staggering. Imagine computers that could repair their own corrupted data by simply running backwards through time until the corruption disappears. Imagine being able to undo any mistake, reverse any damage, restore any lost information by making time flow in reverse for just a few moments. But perhaps the most mind-bending application is in biology. In 2020, biologist Michael Levin at Tufts University discovered something extraordinary. Living cells can be prompted to remember younger states. By manipulating the electrical patterns in biological tissue, he could make old cells behave like young cells, effectively reversing biological time at the cellular level. Levin's technique works by changing the bioelectrical signals that cells use to communicate with each other. These signals don't just carry information, they carry temporal information. They tell cells not just what to do, but when they are in their developmental timeline. By changing these signals, Levin could make cells forget that they were old and remember being young. He could take aged tissue and make it behave like embryonic tissue, reversing years of biological development in a matter of hours. The applications are revolutionary. Could we reverse aging by reversing cellular time? Could we make wounds heal by making damaged tissue remember being healthy? Could we cure diseases by making sick cells remember being well? These aren't distant fantasies. Levin has already demonstrated that you can regrow entire limbs in salamanders by manipulating their bioelectrical patterns. He's shown that you can prevent cancer by changing the electrical signals that tell cells how to behave. He's even made planarian worms grow heads where their tails should be by rewiring their biological time signals. The technique essentially treats the body like a quantum computer made of living cells. Instead of using electromagnetic pulses to reverse quantum states, it uses bioelectrical signals to reverse biological states. The result is the same. Time flows backwards, but now it's happening in living tissue instead of laboratory equipment. But this raises profound questions about the nature of identity and consciousness. If we can make cells reverse their biological time, what happens to the memories and experiences stored in those cells? If we reverse aging in brain tissue, do we also reverse the neural patterns that encode our thoughts and personalities? Some researchers believe that consciousness itself might be a time reversal phenomenon. The way we integrate information from our senses, form memories, and make decisions might depend on the brain's ability to explore multiple future possibilities simultaneously, then collapse them down to a single conscious experience. If that's true, then enhancing our natural time reversal capabilities might not just extend our lives, it might expand our consciousness. We might be able to experience multiple potential futures directly, making decisions based on actual foreknowledge rather than mere prediction. This connects to another emerging technology: predictive materials that seem to anticipate changes before they happen. In 2018, researchers at MIT created polymers that change their properties in response to stimuli that haven't been applied yet. The materials somehow sense stress, temperature changes, or chemical exposure before it occurs, and prepare themselves accordingly. The polymers work by exploiting quantum tunneling effects that allow particles to borrow energy from the future. In quantum mechanics, particles can briefly access energy states they shouldn't be able to reach as long as they pay back the energy quickly enough. These materials use this borrowed energy to prepare for changes that are about to happen. Imagine clothing made from such materials, fabric that becomes warmer just before you get cold, or stronger just before you need to lift something heavy. Imagine medical implants that adjust their function in response to health problems that haven't manifested yet, preventing diseases before symptoms appear. But perhaps the most profound application of time reversal technology is in artificial intelligence. Machine learning algorithms are already using time-symmetric processes to optimize their performance. They run computations forward to see what happens, then run them backward to understand why it happened, gradually improving their predictions through this temporal feedback loop. Future AI systems might be even more explicitly time-reversible. They could explore potential futures in detail, then reverse those explorations to understand which actions in the present would lead to the best outcomes. They'd essentially be thinking backwards from their goals to determine the optimal path forward. Such AI systems wouldn't just predict the future, they'd experience it. They'd live through potential outcomes at accelerated speed, then reverse that experience to inform their present moment decisions. They'd be temporal explorers, sending their consciousness forward and backward through time to navigate reality with unprecedented precision. This technology could revolutionize everything from climate modeling to financial markets to medical diagnosis. Instead of making predictions based on statistical models of past data, we could make decisions based on actual exploration of future possibilities. But all of these technologies raise the same fundamental question. If we can control time's flow at small scales, what prevents us from eventually controlling it at large scales? What stops us from building machines that could reverse time for entire objects, entire rooms, entire cities? The answer lies in the same physics we discussed earlier, the astronomical improbability of coordinating the behavior of large numbers of particles. But technology has a way of making the impossible routine. 100 years ago, the idea of storing and transmitting human voices would have seemed as impossible as time travel does today. Perhaps the real question isn't whether we'll ever control macroscopic time reversal, but what we'll do with that power when we achieve it. Would we use it to undo mistakes, reverse aging, prevent disasters? Or would we discover that the ability to reverse time comes with consequences we never anticipated? The technologies that touch tomorrow are already touching today. Every MRI scan, every quantum computation, every bioelectrical therapy is a small victory over time's tyranny. We're learning to bend time to our will, 1 nanosecond, 1 cell, 1 quantum state at a time. But understanding these technologies also forces us to confront deeper questions about the meaning of forward time itself. Because once you realize that backwards time is not only possible but practical, you start to wonder why forward time feels so precious, and what we might lose if we learn to reverse it at will. There's a Japanese phrase that doesn't translate well into English, but once you understand it, it changes how you see everything around you. Mono no aware. the bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of all things. It's the feeling you get watching cherry blossoms fall, knowing that their beauty lies not in spite of their brief existence, but because of it. The Japanese understand something profound about time's forward flow. It's not a limitation to be overcome, but the very foundation of meaning itself. Every moment flows from past to future, creating significance through sequence, beauty through change, and love through the precious knowledge that nothing lasts forever. In backwards time, mono no aware couldn't exist. There would be no poignant awareness of impermanence, because nothing would be impermanent. Everything would be eternal, cycling endlessly from ending to beginning and back again. The cherry blossoms wouldn't fall. They would rise from the ground and attach themselves to branches, growing younger and smaller until they disappeared into buds that closed and vanished. But without the fall of the petals, there would be no beauty in their blooming. Without the knowledge that the moment will pass, there would be no reason to treasure it. Without the forward flow of time, there would be no meaning in any of it. This is perhaps the deepest insight from imagining backwards time. Understanding why forward time feels so precious isn't just a matter of biology or psychology or even physics. It's a matter of meaning itself. Love, as we understand it, simply couldn't exist in backwards time. Think about what love really is. It's the deepening of connection through shared experiences, the accumulation of moments that build into something greater than the sum of their parts. Two people meet as strangers, gradually learn about each other, share experiences that create bonds, and slowly construct a relationship that becomes more meaningful with each passing day. But in backwards time, love would start with the deepest possible connection and gradually decay into indifference. Couples would begin their relationships knowing everything about each other, having already shared their most intimate moments, already having built their strongest bonds. Then they would spend their time together, gradually forgetting why they cared, slowly losing their connection, until they finally met for the first time and walked away as strangers. The emotional arc would be one of continuous loss. Instead of the joy of discovery, there would be the sadness of forgetting. Instead of the excitement of growing closer, there would be the inevitable drift toward indifference. Instead of building something together, you would be watching something precious slowly dissolve. Wisdom, too, depends entirely on forward time. We accumulate knowledge through experience, learn from our mistakes, and gradually develop better judgment through the accumulation of successes and failures. Each new situation adds to our understanding, creating a growing repository of insight that helps us navigate future challenges. In backwards time, wisdom would work in reverse. You'd start life with perfect understanding and gradually become more foolish. Every experience would take away knowledge rather than add it. Instead of learning from mistakes, you'd forget the lessons you'd already learned. Instead of growing wiser with age, you'd grow more naive, until you finally ended life as an infant who understood nothing at all. The concept of growth would be meaningless. Progress, whether personal, technological, or social, depends on the ability to build upon what came before. Each generation stands on the shoulders of the previous one, adding new knowledge, new capabilities, new solutions to old problems. But in backwards time, each generation would be less capable than the last. Instead of technological progress, there would be technological regress. Computers would become less powerful, medicine less effective, understanding less complete. Humanity would gradually lose its innovations, forgetting how to build complex machines, then simple tools, then even how to make fire. Art and creativity would suffer the same fate. Instead of artists expressing new ideas and emotions through their work, they would start with masterpieces and gradually simplify them into crude sketches, then blank canvases. Musicians would begin with complex symphonies and end with silence. Writers would start with finished novels and gradually delete words until only empty pages remained. The very concept of creativity, bringing something new into existence, would be impossible. In backwards time, nothing new could ever be created, because everything that would exist already existed at the beginning of your personal timeline. Creativity would become destruction, expression would become suppression, and innovation would become regression. But perhaps the most profound loss would be hope itself. Hope is fundamentally about the possibility that the future might be better than the present. It's the belief that through effort, persistence, and sometimes luck, we can create positive change in our lives and in the world around us. In backwards time, hope would be replaced by certain knowledge of what was going to happen. You'd know exactly how your life would unfold because you'd already lived it. There would be no possibility for improvement because improvement would mean changing something that had already been determined by your memories of the future. Without hope, ambition would disappear. Why strive for something better when you already knew whether you'd achieve it or not? Why work toward goals when you remembered either reaching them or failing to reach them? The entire concept of trying to improve your circumstances would be meaningless because your circumstances were already fixed in your memory of what was to come. Dreams would become nightmares of certainty. Instead of imagining wonderful possibilities for the future, you'd be trapped by perfect knowledge of exactly what would happen. Every dream you'd ever had would either be something you remembered achieving, in which case there would be no excitement in pursuing it, or something you remembered failing to achieve, in which case there would be no point in trying. The psychological weight of this certainty would be crushing. Right now, uncertainty about the future can be frightening, but it's also liberating. You don't know what challenges you'll face, but you also don't know what opportunities might arise. You don't know what setbacks await you, but you also don't know what triumphs might be possible. In backwards time, you'd trade the anxiety of uncertainty for the despair of inevitability. Every tragedy you'd experience would be one you'd already lived through in your memory. Every loss would be pre-grieved, every failure pre-regretted, every disappointment pre-felt. But it's not just the big things that would lose their meaning. Even the smallest pleasures of life depend on forward time. The joy of tasting something delicious for the first time would be impossible because you'd already remember every taste. The surprise of discovering a beautiful piece of music would be replaced by the gradual forgetting of why you'd once found it moving. Laughter would work in reverse, too. Instead of building up to a punchline, jokes would start with their funniest moment and gradually become less amusing until they ended in confusion. Comedy would become a process of slowly losing understanding of why something was ever funny in the first place. Even simple pleasures like watching a sunrise would be transformed. Instead of the anticipation and wonder of seeing the day begin, you'd watch the sun sink backwards toward the horizon, knowing that the sunrise was actually the end of the day, not the beginning. The symbolism of new beginnings would be replaced by the reality of endings disguised as starts. In 2021, physicist Carlo Rovelli proposed something that might explain why forward time feels so fundamental to our existence. He argued that time might not be a basic feature of reality at all, but something that emerges from our perspective as conscious observers embedded within the universe. According to Rovelli, the universe might be essentially timeless at its deepest level. Past, present, and future might all coexist eternally in what physicists call the block universe, a four-dimensional structure where every moment that ever was or ever will be exists simultaneously. If Rovelli is right, then our experience of forward-flowing time is like being a fish in a river. We can only perceive the current by being carried along with it. We see time flow forward because we're part of the flow, moving through the static structure of space-time, like a train moving through a landscape. From this perspective, backwards time wouldn't be time flowing in the opposite direction. It would be consciousness moving through the block universe in the opposite direction. Instead of experiencing moments in the order from past to future, backwards consciousness would experience them in the order from future to past. But here's the crucial insight. Either direction of movement through the block universe would create meaning, as long as the movement was consistent. Forward time creates meaning through growth, learning, and the accumulation of experience. Backwards time would create a different kind of meaning through the gradual revelation of understanding that was there all along. Imagine reading a mystery novel backwards. Instead of slowly gathering clues to solve a puzzle, you'd start with complete understanding and gradually discover the elegance of how all the pieces fit together. The meaning wouldn't come from solving the mystery, but from appreciating the craftsmanship of its construction. Perhaps backwards consciousness would experience this kind of meaning, not the satisfaction of building something new, but the wonder of discovering how beautifully everything was already connected. Instead of the joy of creation, there would be the joy of recognition. Instead of the excitement of possibility, there would be the peace of understanding. But even if backwards time could create its own form of meaning, it would be fundamentally alien to everything we understand about consciousness, identity, and purpose. Our entire psychology is built around forward time. Our language, our emotions, our concepts of causation and responsibility and moral value, all of it depends on time. Flowing from past to future, this is why understanding backwards time ultimately teaches us something profound about the nature of forward time. It's not just that we've adapted to live in forward time, it's that forward time is what makes human consciousness possible. Without the ability to form new memories, to grow and change and become something different than what we were, there might not be anything we could recognize as a self. The arrow of time isn't a limitation that constrains us. It's the canvas on which consciousness paints the masterpiece of experience. Without it, there would be no stories to tell, because there would be no progression from beginning to middle to end. There would be no growth to celebrate, because there would be no change from one state to another. There would be no futures to build, because there would be no sequence of actions leading to consequences. Time's forward flow creates the very possibility of meaning by creating the possibility of narrative. Our lives are stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who we're becoming. Take away the forward progression of time, and you take away the story structure that gives those narratives their power. In the end, the deepest truth about backwards time might be that it shows us how extraordinary forward time really is. We take it for granted because we've never experienced anything else. But the ability to move from past to future, to grow and change and create new experiences, is actually one of the most remarkable features of existence. Every second that ticks by is carrying us toward an open future full of possibilities we can't yet imagine. Every moment that passes is adding to the story of who we are and who we might become. Every breath we take is participating in the universe's greatest miracle, the transformation of what was into what could be. The wheel of time doesn't need to spin backwards for us to appreciate the journey forward. Understanding what we would lose in reverse makes us realize what we gain by moving ahead. The arrow of time isn't pointed toward our destination. It is our destination, carrying us through the most incredible adventure possible, the experience of being conscious, growing, changing beings in a universe that allows us to create meaning from the simple act of moving from one moment to the next. Forward time isn't just the direction we happen to be traveling. It's the direction that makes the journey worthwhile.